Welcome back.
Hello.
This is week 101 of Santa Barbara. And we watched Lou Grant on Saturday night, and Ben Piazza was on. He, of course, plays Dr. Rawlings. Several Santa Barbara people we've had on Lou Grant. Didn't we have Nick Hartley a while back?
Yeah, and I feel like we've seen a few people on, was it Canon? We saw someone as well.
On Canon. Since the last one? I don't remember. I didn't write it down. We'll remember. So we have, I was looking ahead, because we only have a short week this week, only Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because of the 4th of July. I was looking ahead to see what was coming up, and I noticed something that I wasn't expecting to happen so soon is going to be happening next week. So there'll be a bit of a shock. I'll talk about that more on Wednesday. We watched episode 490, which originally aired Monday, June 30th, 1986. And Mason gets drunk when Mark tells him he might be the father of Mary's baby. And after an entire episode of getting drunk and feeling sorry for himself, he tracks down Mary at the clinic and starts ranting about how disappointed he is in her before she finally cuts him off and tells him that Mark raped her. So I think Mark may have made a mistake coming back to town. I don't know what's going to happen to him. I assume Mason, being in the legal profession, will try and get him arrested, I guess.
Yeah, and basically that's the sort of storyline for them this whole episode. It ends with that revelation.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, but he's pretty drunk, so it'll probably go a bit off the rails for a while until he sobers up. But he might end up attacking Mark, first, and then realizing probably it'd be better if they just try to send Mark to jail. Better for everything, including their future. So we'll see how that goes.
And it's worth noting that this is taking place before we had really detailed DNA tests or anything like this. So,
The only thing they could do was a blood test,
yeah.
just to see if the blood type was a potential match. Although I guess, eventually if the baby looked like one side or the other. Then.
Well, Channing was blonde like quite a few of the other Capwells, so hard to say.
That's true, and Brooke has brown hair. Lionel tells Augusta that Minx will just have to get used to the fact that her husband committed fraud. Augusta makes a reference to Down and Out in Santa Barbara, which I assume is a reference to Down and Out in Beverly Hills, which I remember is a movie, but maybe there was a book, and that's what she's referencing. Or that movie came out, and it was so popular with the people of California that they wanted to include it. They talk about spending a month in Tahiti when they get their money back and making love underwater. He likens them to Scott and Zelda, among others, and Augusta suggests maybe Blondie and Dagwood. Augusta thinks that if Minx doesn't get back into her own home soon, she'll put some more buckshot in Cece's derriere. And Lionel and Grant basically spend the day trying to get Mason to give them the papers, but of course he is distracted by his being extremely drunk and desolate. Desolate? Is that the word?
Disconsolate whole little drama Mary. With Mary is definitely more important to him at this point.
At one point he threatens to burn the paper. Mason tells Eden that Cece's about to lose half his fortune and to make sure the Orient Express is in her name. He visits Cece to tell him he's about to lose half his company, and Cece doesn't believe him, remembering that just a few weeks ago he had a big whole novella that was full of blank paper.
Yes.
Mason wonders if he was in cahoots with T. McDonald the whole time. And of course, I strongly suspect Cece has no idea what's going on at all. And he may be forced to give up half his company, but it may turn out he had no culpability in anything. Cece tells him that the only good thing in his life is Mary, and that he will help speed up the annulment if he can. So he basically blows off all the company stuff to say that Mason's gonna should be focusing on that and not this other nonsense, whatever it might be.
And I think this is maybe a little bit too little too late on Cece's part in terms of his relationship with Mason. Remember, one of the ways that Grant got Mason involved in this whole plot was to point out that Cece wasn't doing a thing to help his relationship with Mary, and wasn't helping her to get the annulment. So it's nice that Cece's offering that now. I can't help but think it would have been a bit better if he had done it a week or two earlier.
I think Grant mentions that in this episode, actually. Minx is brought back triumphantly to the Luckridge home and told that they've got the house back. Grant shows up and blurts out that T. McDonald Lockridge cheated Emmett Capwell into buying a fake company because Capwell had been blocking a real estate deal for years. Instead of being annoyed, Minx is thrilled that her husband pulled one over on the Capwells.
Now, I think they're being a little premature in celebrating getting their house back.
Yes, because someone says, about to, and she goes, about to? You said we had it back. Are you saying we don't have it back? And then Mason arrives and says he didn't find any documents in the archives. So he's once again let sentiment bring him back over to Cece's side again, whether it was the whole thing about the annulment or just the whole thing about Cece not caring about the company. And Cece's still on his date with Sophia. This time, this is just a brief interlude, and so I don't know. He's in a very good mood, and maybe that Mason caught on to that.
I do think I think the Lockridges will get their house back eventually because it's so much more fun to have them next door. But I do wonder if Minx's glee at her husband having been, part of perhaps pulling something over on the Capwells will perhaps erode their relationship with Grant a little bit, who is, after all, a Capwell as well.
Well, this scene ends pretty badly for the joint company because Grant says he has no intention of giving up, but he wants the Lockridges just to stay out of it. So I don't know if he's kind of blaming them for this going astray. I think really Mason obviously claims to have failed to find those papers, even though he was teasing that he had them all, earlier in the episode. So it'll be interesting to see what Grant manages to do with that paper that Mason has. Maybe there's backups somewhere else. I don't know.
Well, this might become the paper, and we don't really know what's on it, might become a bit of a MacGuffin that they kind of banter around a little bit throughout this, and eventually it will be revealed, I'm sure, what was on it, but we don't really know the nature of it yet.
Sophia and Cece end up in the bedroom, and she finds the nightie that she wore on their wedding night, which she had carefully packed away and found still there after all these years. But she, of course, has to reveal that she had cancer surgery, and that she'll give him more time to reconsider whether he wants to sleep with her tonight. Cece starts to tell her that he knew about the cancer, but is distracted by a drunken Mason downstairs. And when he comes back, he tells Sophia instead that what he was going to say was that he's sorry she had cancer and doesn't want her to be alone. So, I don't know, it seems like a fairly minor thing to withhold, but I feel like, this is going to drive a wedge between them again, maybe only briefly when she finds out that he knew and didn't tell her.
Yeah, secrets never go unpunished in these shows.
Santana overhears Cruz tell Eden that he's not going to end his marriage. And she tells Eden she can have Cruz. Then she tells Cruz they should get a divorce. But thanks to her crazy brain, due to her crack, halfway through the conversation, she takes a sudden swing in the other direction and says that they can make it work. So this must be really confusing Cruz, because a second ago she was asking for a divorce. Now she wants to make it work. So, yeah.
Well, basically it comes down to they can't break up this episode because they've got the reunion. If they break up now, they won't both be going to the reunion together, right?
That's right. And I was just browsing ahead in my Santa Barbara calendar to see if I had put any post-it notes over any faces, so you won't be spoiled. And there's a picture of A. Martinez standing next to a slide projector with his high school photo up. So that must be from the reunion episode. So hopefully they'll come up this week or next week. It'll be fun to see.
Now it'll be even more fun if, for some reason, Eden ends up at this reunion as well. I can't imagine on what grounds she would show up for it. But, or she might be there somehow to pick up the pieces, which we actually saw her moving into position to do this episode.
What if they hold it at the Orient Express? Eden will have to be there because she works there.
Will.
Okay, that's my guess now. And that is it for the Monday episode. So we'll be back for the second of 3 episodes this week for Tuesday, July 1st. Oh, Canada Day. Maybe I'll do some research to see if there was any special Canada Day celebrations in 1986. We've already got Expo going on. We've already met Prince Charles. What a year. All right, we'll be back after we watch episode 491. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Well, what if we're getting carried away? I mean, putting the champagne before the horses.
Let me tell you something. We're supposed to get carried away. That's our style. Scott and Zelda, Wallace and Edwards, right?
Blondie and Dagwood.
Welcome back.
Hello.
This is episode 491 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. And just checking to see the comings and goings, I was surprised that a character left the show yesterday. Because it was not clear that was happening. So I'll leave it for a few more days in case it's brought up in dialogue by another character. Episode 491 of Santa Barbara originally aired July 1st, 1986. Happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day.
And, of course, that means the 4th of July is just around the corner, and this episode, the characters on the show start to mention it. Cece and Sophia wake up together, and when Lionel visits, he realizes that Sophia slept over. Cece and Sophia visit Kelly unexpectedly, and luckily appear to be allowed in, so that's nice for them. And, of course, she wants to leave, but they say that they can't, and Pearl actually explains to her too. There's a lot of paperwork involved. It's not up to your parents. And of course, they're all prepping for their 4th of July party, which leads Kelly to reminisce about the big parties they used to have at the Capwell house. And Cece and Sophia promise her a big party when she gets out to rival their 4th of July bashes. Lionel lets it slip to Sophia that Cece knew he had cancer. She had cancer. So he thought that Cece had told her, obviously. And Cece gets an engagement ring out of the safe so that he can propose to Sophia. But she comes in, quite angry, and demands to know if last night was just out of pity. So, I don't know how long they can stretch that animosity out there.
Yeah, it seems a bit contrived. But I think it's partly perhaps to get some of the timing in, because if they go through this little, dust up, it will leave things a bit more raw when, I guess, I don't know, will Pamela come into the scene maybe, make it a little more raw again, or perhaps we'll see some more machinations from some of the other characters.
Yep, I remember a little bit about how this goes, so I won't tell you.
Okay.
Lionel and Cece argue over T. McDonald's scheme, and Lionel ends up concluding that no matter what happened, Lionel and his father loved each other, but Cece was willing to throw Grant under the bus at a moment's notice, and that's the difference between the Capwells and the Lockridges. Not much Cece can say to that. He's still protesting he did nothing, so... We have a new nurse gainer at the state hospital. Her hair's being done the same way as the previous nurse, so I assume that was also Nurse Gainer. According to IMDb, I think we have this new Nurse Gainer for 5 episodes.
Okay.
Pearl is George Washington today, and somehow he's pulled an old-timey soldier's uniform out of wherever he gets his various props. probably the odd Napoleon in the mental institution over the years. Maybe he repurposed a costume he found in storage. Everyone's excited about the 4th of July party, but when Courtney sneaks in, disguised as a caterer in a Mario Brothers looking outfit, Rawlings catches them partly undressed and cancels the party. And does not seem to recognize Courtney as Pearl's sister, so maybe he wasn't involved in that discussion. He says, he thinks she's just part of the catering crew for the 4th of July thing, and just admonishes her in that capacity. Of course, everyone's angry with Pearl that the party's been canceled, but Pearl says, you know what, we're going to have that party anyway. Mm-hmm. So I assume the next episode will be a wacky attempt to have a surreptitious 4th of July party without the staff finding out.
And I do think at some point in the story it was just tossed off, but I think there was some mention of electroshock therapy, just in the context of one of the other patients. So I sort of feel like that the fact that that's kind of in the background, as I say, we talked about a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest scenario where Pearl might end up in some danger. And I think if he keeps rebelling and is sort of targeted as a troublemaker, that could be a threat for him.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering why they brought this new character in, this big guy that's a returning customer at the state hospital. I thought it was just to give Pearl a wacky scene to interact with someone else, pretend he is another general in the army. But yeah, this could be it too, just to reiterate that people are getting electroshock therapy, assuming that was the character that they discussed that on. I don't recall it. Mason tells Mary that they need to prosecute Mark, and they should have done it from the beginning. Mary doesn't think there's any evidence because Mark's saying that she did not fight him, but Mason says that he saw her after the fact and can testify that she was very upset. In retaliation, Mark says he'll sue for custody of the baby and won't agree to the annulment. So Mary contemplates the unthinkable, leaving the church so she can sue for divorce instead. And Mason utters a bit of a threat at the end of the episode, saying he's going to get Mark. So I don't know if he has an extrajudicial thing in mind there, or if he just means he's going to go to Keith and say, we got to prosecute this guy.
And of course, it's always a bit of a thing when characters threaten another character, because you could also imagine maybe this leading up some way to a sweep storyline in which Mark has come to some grievous harm and Mason is a suspect. That might be a possibility too.
That's it for the episode. The credits had an interesting thing. Ben Piazza is back in the main credits as Dr. Rawlings, so maybe him being in the day players section last time was an error, or they decided to renew his contract because they thought of something else they could do with the story. Missing this week, not unexpectedly, David Laurent is no longer in the cast, and of course Sheila was never in the main cast. So those are the two main differences, and Owen and Nurse Gaynor and Morrison, that was the big guy they brought in, are in the day player credits. I think Owen is Pearl's roommate, right? I don't know. I think I called him Drew last time, so I'm not quite sure which is correct at this point. We'll straighten that out later. That's it, and we have a very short week, so tomorrow is the last episode of the week, Wednesday, July 2nd. Of course, I would have seen this episode originally, being a holiday in Canada. And we'll see if they have a Wednesday cliffhanger this week when we watch episode 492 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Look at it this way. Things couldn't get any worse.
I hope not.
This isn't where you grew up.
Yeah, it is. Why?
As a kid, your whole life?
Well, I stepped out now and then to pick up the mail.
Ted, wait, I can't tell which one's the state senator.
I showed you. She's next to the bar table.
All I saw was his wife or his daughter.
You sexist. She is the senator.
Well,
What's the matter, Santana?
Allergies.
Well, I'm allergic to most of the bozos here myself.
It's hay fever. I rarely take one. It's got to be something in the air.
Well, maybe your dear, sweet Mamacita forgot to dust down here.
I can't believe Cece didn't slam the door right in your face.
Well, I wouldn't have come except for my escort, Keith here. Insisted it. And you know how he can be.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 492 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, July 2nd, 1986, and was the last episode to air in this week. I was doing some unpacking from our move over a year ago and came across one of the cassette tapes that I used to use to tape Another World and Santa Barbara. These are 120-minute cassettes, so 60 on each side, and I put them into my brother's recorder, which allowed you to hit record and then turn off the power, and when the power came back on, it would start recording. So I put that on one of those timers you put on a lamp. So I'm going to pop this into the ghetto blaster that I have, and we'll see what's on here.
When Joe Gottstein opened Long Acres 50 years ago, he made it more than a place where horses could race.
Live from New York, the special telecast of Search for Tomorrow, today on NBC.
Live from New York, it's Search for Tomorrow. Yeah, careful of the bed. Wendy, what are you doing here?
It is the 4th of July in Santa Barbara. So funny, yesterday Kelly was saying it's almost the 4th of July. They were literally preparing for a party, and then it is the 4th of July. So it's one of those soap opera days that suddenly becomes another day. But Kelly also is confused, so we could say maybe yesterday was already the 4th of July.
Maybe.
And Cece and Sophia just didn't have the heart to tell her. She was mixed up. The patients at the state hospital put their plan into action. They pretend to swallow their pills, and then Pearl mixes them into Nurse Gaynor's coffee, and she loses consciousness. They put her on a gurney and wheel her out. They have ice creams delivered, and we reveal that Pearl had asked them to smuggle it in by putting it in individual cups, and the box is labeled specimen cups. So that's how that got into the building. When Kelly asks Owen to dance, he says, "I don't have any sexual feelings for you." To which Kelly replies, "That's all right."
It'd be a change, actually, for her.
That's true. Pearl has a big surprise for fireworks. He's filled some balloons with paint, and he clears the space on the wall and puts on the 1812 Overture, and at the appropriate moment they throw all the paint-filled balloons. However, it's around that time that Nurse Gaynor regains consciousness, and she gets the final balloon in the face as she opens the door to find out what all the noise is.
You know, Owen's comment about not being attracted to Kelly does make me wonder if perhaps part of the reason he's found himself in this situation is possibly because he is gay, because at this time that would have still be considered probably a mental health issue. And you can certainly see it with the reaction we saw at the beginning of the series when we found out that Channing was gay. So, at this time it was still considered a sort of abnormal form of psychology. So
That's true.
I wonder if that's contributed to his problems.
Interesting thought. I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, it was a surprising thing for him to say. Clearly somehow related to his whatever his illness is. Despite Cece's protestations, Sophia is still convinced that he only wants her back out of pity, even when he asks her to marry him. Cece tells Eden, though, Mother and I might have a surprise for you later. He still thinks she'll say yes by the end of the party. he also mentions that, Bob Nottingham's son's going to be here. You remember he took you to the theater when you were living in Paris? You don't have to marry him, just go on a date with him. Sophia's actually in on that conversation, so that's kind of funny. So interesting, indication, a reminder that when Eden was in Europe, she didn't spend the whole time in that, Rapunzel Tower looking out at the stables. I mean, she was having a good time in Europe before, maybe even during and after that she met Cruz. This is an interesting idea of potentially a former love of Eden's showing up from Europe someday.
Yeah.
Cece tells Eden that Sophia is angry because somehow he managed not to tell her that he knew about the cancer in time. And Eden tries to smooth things over with Sophia by saying, it's not really any different than you keeping it from the rest of the family this whole time. I think, this may be an impediment that can be smoothed over, given a little bit of time.
And considering that Sophia hid her identity behind the Dominic disguise for the first year she was on the show, I think she should be a little bit more sympathetic to people, perhaps not putting all of their truth out there.
Mason worries that someone might have overheard Mark at the Orient Express saying he could be the father of Mary's baby and that it might get back to Cece at the party. Mary, once again, says she would rather not prosecute Mark because she doesn't want to have to relive it, which is, I think, a valid thing that a lot of people have to weigh.
Mm-hmm.
Mason tells Cece that Mark is fighting the annulment. And Cece goes, okay, where does he live? I'll go have a talk with him. But Mason says that he's handling it. So this makes me wonder, just the way Mason phoned Mark and brought him from the Caribbean. Is Mason doing something towards prosecuting Mark without really Mary's approval? Is this going to be, a rift between Mason and Mary, surprisingly, when it's supposedly about bringing them together?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cruz buys Santana a brand new car!
And I think that car is going to end up crashed at some point.
Oh, that's right. She's full of crack. I forgot. I wasn't really putting that together. Because I'm like, I don't remember Santana having a new car. So that could be because it's only going to be around till probably the drive home from the reunion, if I had to guess.
But it's kind of funny that he did that because that's such a Kurt Cranston thing to do. It just seems like an odd thing for Cruz to do, to me.
So I can see now after what you said that it's very plot-driven and not character-driven. Aha, which I love. Santana tells Keith she wasn't invited to Cece's party, but then it's revealed that Cruz actually did get an invitation. And Santana says, well, then we really should swing by for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Haley, Ted, and Jane are hanging out at the beach bar. Summertime fun time has begun. Haley is looking through the paper and goes, it's actually going to be really expensive to try and get a place on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if the three of them are going to end up moving in together. I mean, this is what I
think that's possible. And they'll be roommates from hell.
But, probably a lot of people end up with roommates when they go to college that they're not really compatible with. So this is no different.
Well, I mean, Ted's already shacked up with Danny Andrade at one point, and I think Jade crashed in on them that first summer as well. So he's had these kind of living arrangements, and Haley was living with Gina.
Mm-hmm. Jane reveals she's been ordered to cover that bourgeois Capwell party for the radio station. And she says to Ted, do I have to wear a dress? It's more Jane's character stuff coming out. Ted arrives at the party with Jane, and Cece is so happy he's not with Haley. And this girl is much better for you, better suited. And Ted says, I'm still with Haley. It's just she couldn't make it. Jane has a fun line about when she sees the atrium. Let me just get the exact quote. This isn't where you grew up, she says. And he says, yeah. She says, your whole life? He says, well, I stepped out to get the mail. So, yeah, she's still kind of in her eat the rich mindset, I think.
Now, remember, actually, that's not really true because, of course, as we've just mentioned, Ted did live briefly with Danny and Jade. And, of course, he did live with Mason in the Kelly's apartment at one point as well.
And now we see the first cracks in Jane's personality, because she complains to Ted that she couldn't find that senator that he directed her to go and find. Mm-hmm. All I found was his wife and his kid. Mm-hmm. And Ted says, that woman is the senator, you sexist.
Yes.
So that was a nice little twist on Jane.
Well, we've already commented on that, actually, in her treatment of Haley and, you know, kind of bossing her around and not seeing her as a respectful sort of equal as well. So, yeah, she's definitely got that side to her.
Mm-hmm. Other than that, she seemed to be having a good time with Ted, so potentially another love interest for Ted if something breaks down with Haley, which I can't remember if there's any... Oh, yeah, there's the secret of Gina that could still come between them, right? Could break them up briefly. Keith Timmons asks Gina, Blake, DeMott, Capwell to the Capwell 4th of July party. At first she thinks he wants to arrest her for something and is shocked, and she agrees, and the next thing you know, she's trying on an expensive new dress in front of Haley that she bought with Haley's money, so Haley's a bit annoyed. Mm-hmm. But Gina says, what do you think about the new district attorney? I think he's a very handsome man. And then a little bit later, do you think I should sleep with the DA? Maybe tomorrow. Now, this is funny, because the first time Gina mentioned the DA about 2 weeks ago, she goes, oh, I have no interest in dating him. Mm-hmm. So this is interesting, an interesting 180, because she seems to go all in right from the first second, and it's more than about, you know, getting a foot back in the Capwell door.
Actually, I kind of liked seeing the side of Gina again, because we get so used to seeing her as the schemer, the one with all of these outrageous plans, that it's kind of easy to forget that, you know, she is a very attractive woman. That's what really drew CC to her, and to the point where he married her. And yeah, why wouldn't men find her attractive? I mean, she may not have the most attractive personality, but, you know, I can see where someone like Keith Timmons would not find that a problem necessarily.
Yeah, because he seems to be a little bit shady, so that's kind of an interesting pairing. But unfortunately, when they meet at the Capwell door as prearranged, Keith says, just so there's no misunderstanding, I knew you wanted to come, and I wanted to walk in with someone. Mm-hmm. So he seems to be shutting down this, because he is clearly still infatuated with Santana.
Which will be another potential point of conflict between Gina and Santana.
I know, because at one point later when she's talking about it to Haley, she said something about, oh, Santana's got, you know, everything. And Haley goes, you mean Brandon? He goes, oh yeah, him too. So, this is now a second thing to battle with Santana over, which is great. Gina enjoys the look on Cece's face when she walks in with Keith, and Haley, too. I can't quite remember what the shenanigans were about her not attending, but then attending. Or maybe she just didn't want to go with Ted because of the optics. But Cece says, oh, welcome to my home, Haley. And then Gina does the rounds of the various family members just to let everyone know she's there. Eden checks in to see what Gina's doing there. And Gina says, oh, I guess anyone who is anyone is here. And then she looks at the door and says, and some who aren't, as Santana walks in with Cruz. Gina says, what's the matter, Santana? Santana says, allergies. I rarely I rarely take anything for them. There must be something in the air. And then Gina says, maybe Mamacita forgot to dust. I think you know my escort, Keith Timmons. Cece wonders how she got Keith Timmons to take her to this party. Gina tries to remind him of how great they were together in bed. And he plays it off. And she says, you have Mrs. Capwell's to burn. And Cece says, I only ever had one real wife. And he actually mentions having 2 wives at one point in this episode, completely forgetting about Pamela.
Yeah.
Then as luck would have it, Gina spots Santana's purse briefly unattended, and I think she does this in Cece's bedroom. She replaces her brand new set of allergy pills with a new bottle of crack. On the way downstairs, Gina tries to reminisce with Mason about their love affair. And he says, oh, when I see you, I'm always reminded that Mary wouldn't have married Mark if it wasn't for you. That's when I think of choking you. And by this point, Gina is quite annoyed to realize that Keith and Santana have gone off together. And she gets really drunk. And she almost, she does call Haley her niece at one point, but they're off in the corner and no one hears it. But Haley's trying to keep her contained. Do you want me to drop you at home? And then Gina says, to what? My cookies? When did everybody pair up? If Sophia can come back from the ashes, so can I. And this is the start of something that I think, we've thought of before when she had the tape. So what can she get with the tape? And now she's like, So I think she may be asking for more than she originally had planned with that tape, because she might want just everything back.
You know what I wish? I wish that when she had the conversation with CC just a little bit earlier, and he said, oh, I only had one wife. I kind of wish Mason had been in the vicinity of
I know,
that
I was wondering if
conversation.
we were going to see him, nearby, but, because Grant was really going into that the other day, that Cece just totally forgot about Pamela.
And, that would have been interesting as well, because that could have potentially pushed Mason and Gina back into an alliance. But it didn't happen, so.
Nope. Maybe someday. Wherever they've sneaked off to, Santana says to Keith, I want to give my marriage a go. Keith says, you've been trying to get Cruz's attention for 15 years. So this is now, I think, the first time we have a set number as to what reunion this might be. I suspect it will be their 15th reunion. So it's 1986, so it'll be class of 71, I guess. So we'll see if that's right. I like how when they leave little breadcrumbs towards these big events that they have. And then Cruz tells Keith to stay away from his wife. Eden tells Cruz that she couldn't wait for him all night yesterday and had to lock up eventually. Did you ever come by? And he says, no, I didn't. Eden says that they're still friends, and Cruz says they're not friends, they're lovers who aren't lovers anymore. There's a long one or two conversations that Cruz and Eden have, or one or two scenes in this conversation, which I'll gloss over, because in the end they go off to the beach bar together. She reaches into his pocket to get a quarter for the jukebox. Then he stands super close as she puts the quarter in, and they end up dancing at the beach bar just as Cece's fireworks light up the sky.
And of course we hear their familiar theme
The
song.
last guest has gone.
But there was actually in the conversations they have, there was one line that Eden said that I really liked, because Cruz says something about, she needs to stop chasing him or something. And she says, I'm in my own home. You came to me. So I think, I think Eden has definitely been accommodating opportunities to see Cruz, but I don't think he's entirely innocent in that.
Hopefully Eden won't hit it off with Will Robinson or whatever his name is at their dinner, and it'll be another Kirk Cranston situation, keeping Cruz and Eden apart for another half year. That's it for this episode and this week. And you were kind of doing something else during this episode, so you may not have realized that this episode saw the birth of one of the biggest super couples ever in the history of Santa Barbara. Some people seem to prefer Cruz and Eden, but I would say this is my favorite couple on the show. Of course, we're talking about Owen and Kelly. No, that's a joke. And now, the big news. When we were on the cruise, there were 3 things that I had hoped you would not find out, spoiler-wise.
Okay.
The first, of course, was who killed Channing Capwell Jr. Thanks to Simon, you found out 20 seconds into the first time. The other thing was the secret of Brick, which you managed not to hear, and you know, up until the last Christmas episode, Christmas '85, when Minx made the big revelation, you were in the dark, and you guessed it. You guessed it a few days earlier, which is great. And the third thing, which I'm shocked no one mentioned, and it definitely would have come up in the trivia contest, but you purposely didn't attend that because it was just going to be all spoilers. And also, you know, we unfortunately didn't really interact with a lot of the other people on the cruise because people were having dinners together and stuff, which would have been nice, but I was worried about the spoilers, so we kind of stuck on our own this time around. So the third thing happens next week, the most shocking thing ever in the history of Santa Barbara, and arguably the most shocking thing ever to happen on any daytime soap in the U.S.
So I'll actually have to watch that episode.
You will. Well, I'm not going to tell you which episode, but next week it happens. And it's definitely made some top 10 lists. So unless some pop-up on the internet spoils it for you in the next few days, hopefully you'll find it as shocking as everyone else on Earth did. And that is it for the 101st week of Santa Barbara. We're already on week 102 starting next week. And at the end of July, we'll be starting year 2 of Santa Barbara. So we'll be back after we watch the Monday, July 7th episode, number 493. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Owen, would you dance with me?
I don't have any sexual feelings for you.
Well, that's all right.
I mean, a guy gets kind of lonely around this kind of a place. You know what I mean?
Put your jacket on and get out of here.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say hello.
Hello? This is hello?
Well, things kind of got out of hand, but haven't you ever been in love?